go ahead and call the meeting to order. Shoot, just lost it. All right. Anything not on the agenda? All right, consideration of the September 7th meeting minutes. I thought they looked fine, personally.
Motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Great. All right. And our guests of honor are here right in time to talk about the South District Bus Stop Bench Project.
You're up first.
Hello again.
Hello.
Yeah, so had a lot of things sort of happening behind the scenes for the past couple of months. Thank you very much for those of you that were part of the subcommittee meetings and everything. And thank you, Rachel, as well, for getting everything organized for us. And Ron, you did a bang-up job that one week. You did a lot of legwork
Thank you.
at one point, so thank you very much for doing that. I believe Rachel was kind enough to get some of the budget number things, considerations that we want to discuss printed out for each of you to look at and check out. And at the very top is the budget from the original set of contracts, the agreements that we have with the 2,000, 8,000 breakout for Ethan specifically. And then down at the bottom of the page, we've got sort of the larger budget that Ethan and I sort of pulled together last minute here with the numbers that we know of at this moment and what we're kind of looking at, including each of the line items that, anything that you wish to ask questions about or discuss, we're more than open to discussing.
This is very minor, but structural is misspelled there in the
Oh.
budget, so
Thanks.
make sure that that's correct.
Yeah.
What's the total budget for the public art program?
Around $50,000.
Okay.
Anita, how are things looking on your end? Just, you're the artist. You've done public art. How are things looking for you? What are you thinking? What are your thoughts, vibes, feelings, et cetera?
Well, I am concerned that it's like almost $10,000 over budget.
Yep.
And, it's not for me to decide, but that's quite a bit. It's almost doubled its budget. And so that's a concern, because I think part of the thing that public art has to do is to be within those confines, but, and I couldn't follow all the threads.
That's fair.
So is there a set place now for the location?
No,
No. Not at
not-
this time.
Not exactly yet.
Okay, so in that case, we still don't know what is in that space and what exists and what's above ground and what's underground, and that can be a problem. I don't
Yeah,
know.
so the top runner, at least Ethan and my favorite bus stop, let's see if I can remember this number correctly, 8069 Fair Meadows Park bus stop is, again, Ethan, my favorite. There's still conversation going on with the South District of that specific one and 3 others. And we went through about 3 different bus lines that go through the South District and checked off each of the different bus stops and marked off bus stops that would be too small for the current design. Also, I should step back one moment and say that the reason we're still focusing on the current design is because the South District leadership said that they really want to stick with that design. They had a member who recently passed that was very emphatic about the design and really enjoyed it. And so sort of in memorandum, they wanted to do the best that they could to keep the current design. So with that in mind, then, that's when Ethan and I went through all the different bus stops, checked to see what ones we thought would actually fit, and which ones wouldn't conflict too much with the infrastructure that we could see. Like, for example, one of them, we felt it was going to be in the way of the path of a fire hydrant from across the street for, in case anything were to happen with an apartment building or whatever. We also did our best to ensure that it wouldn't be like blocking window views from different locations as little as possible. And then whenever we came across like a single family residency, we just thought that was just stay away from that. There's no need to call eminent domain or anything like that on something along those lines. So it whittled it down to basically just 4 bus stops that the South District is still kind of mulling over at the moment.
And so going through the budget, is the structural engineer, the price, the quantity, is that 54 hours? What does that mean? Like what?
Yeah.
I don't know, is it?
Right, yeah. They gave us an initial estimate of $6,000. When we went back to them and talked to them about using the jib crane as like a structure, they came back and said, oh, okay, well then $5,400. And I'm assuming that that's based off of a $100 per hour rate, and they'd be putting in about 54 hours or something like that.
So that's for them, they're fabricating, right? Is that it?
No, that's just for engineering.
They're reviewing the plans and going to sign and seal from a structural standpoint.
Yep.
I know I'd emailed you. Did you look at any other structural engineers locally? Or do you have do you have a contact with somebody at Raker Roads? That's why you chose that firm?
Yeah, I thought I'd responded to you, and I'm sorry.
You may have. I just.
No, that's all good. Yeah, unfortunately, so the handful that like the 2 or 3 others that we also reached out to, tried a couple of times, like 2 or 3 times each, and Raker Roads was the only group that really got back to us. And I had also sort of mentioned in an email thread that I might be wearing their patience thin a bit too, which I understand because we're coming back, there's no promise of a paycheck, and I'm asking how they can decrease their estimate. So I could get why somebody wouldn't want to take our calls.
I do think, even though it's over budget, it's kind of the first project of this sort. So we don't really have that much experience in how much it's going to cost. So I think it seems to me like it's not that unusual to have a little bit of a budget increase.
I guess I'm just curious how confident you are in these numbers. Like, if it hasn't been engineered yet, how do you know how many steel tubes you need? Like, this seems very specific.
Sure. So we do have a 3D model that I found some scripts online that pull what the perimeters are of different faces and facets, and that's how I figured out the lengths of bar that would be needed for it. And I went with like whole lengths based on what I was looking up online and everything. And then like the sheets is based off of another script that pulls the surface area, and then did similar extractions from there.
And can you explain the contingency? What is that?
Contingency, in my experience with a bunch of other projects in different lives that I've lived, contingency is something that's always going to be there of just buffer room, things that you just don't know. Usually at the beginning of a project, contingency starts out, I like to start at around 30% or so, and then it starts to whittle down the more that you get figured out as the project continues on. So.
With the notation here, is this reflecting a 15% contingency then? Or, okay, great.
Also, do we want to add that the materials he was researching are the most expensive, like, variation online, like, the most expensive option? So it's like, it's already overestimated already with the materials.
Yeah, it's sort of.
Wait, you were saying it yesterday.
Yeah, it's a conservative estimate in regards to the materials. I like to estimate out materials themselves high, and then if we can get them cheaper, all the better. But yeah, I just like to try to cover all the bases.
So it's the
Will
same.
there be
here. Sorry, go ahead.
Will there be a foundation needed? Some of the bus stops already have foundations.
Yeah, that's a great question because thankfully, one of the many things that Ron did in a given week, doing a lot of legwork, he met with Ethan and I and also had one of the city engineers come along. And we were talking about that the pads that are current existing for bus stops, they're only, is it 4 to 6 inches or is it 6 inches? Yeah, 6 inches. The footing that we need for something to be cantilevered like this is closer to 3 feet deep. And so that slab of concrete wouldn't necessarily cut it for a project like this, for this particular project.
So the jib crane is going to be kind of embedded inside of the hand?
Yep, yeah, that's it. It's going to be the structure, like if the hand is here, then the jib crane, this is a really poor presentation, but it'll be at the front of the wrist, running along the bottom of the thumb, and then the end is where it'll attach to the top of a ski lift to be the actual set for the bench.
Seems kind of surprising that they need $6,000 to engineer it. They're just relying on that, but I won't question it.
Well, I was thinking, do you have any,
That was my
Ron,
contact.
and, okay. Other suggestions?
I mean, maybe
going
that,
forward?
I suspect the person they were referring to that passed away, I don't know if MMS has structural engineers though. They're civil engineers. But that's who they're also in the South District. They might be.
Okay, yeah.
I don't think they have any
They don't have
structural, I don't think they have any
structural
structurals on staff.
Okay.
Did you reach out to Shoemaker Holland?
Yeah, I
They
believe we
didn't
did.
answer.
Yeah, they didn't get back, unfortunately.
So I think maybe what you guys need to decide is looking at these budgets, like what are you comfortable with and what do you want to move forward with? And then just basically give staff direction so that we can work directly with the artists and don't have to like keep coming back to these meetings necessarily and having this kind of a conversation. But just so I kind of know like what budget threshold, and then as we figure out the location and continue getting estimates from engineers, that just gives me some parameters to work within.
So I'm wondering if the neighborhood association or South of Six or if some of this extra cost could be made up from sponsorship, or if I don't know of any other, granting sort of things at the moment, but if there's a way to make up some of this increase with, non-PAC money, because it is really hard to say, hey, we have to budget another $9,000 some odd dollars for this over the course of this, fiscal year, next fiscal year, et cetera. So I'm just wondering if some of those funds could be found elsewhere.
Yeah.
And, I don't know, but.
Right. Yeah, I will admit that that was something we've discussed early on in the project, and that was highly discouraged at that time to mix funding sources, I guess. That I think it was explained that The idea for PAC, and especially this project, is that the funding that's being provided is the funding that will pay for the project, and we were asked to do everything that we could to bring the budget down, basically.
I think where it's helpful to set that budget threshold is if you tell me, no, 12,000 is what we want to stick with, then, you know, we can have that conversation with the South of Six to say we understand that the hand was your preferred design. Unfortunately, absent another funding source, we can't proceed with that due to cost. So just like weighing that and kind of helps.
I don't remember how the original RFP was worded, but with the sort of scale of kind of, and the sculptural quality of the proposal, 20,000 sounds like a reasonable budget, 22. And we don't have a lot of competing things we're trying to spend that on right now in our current fiscal year. So I don't know, I would support it. And just, I think it's a lesson for us to learn as well as we're putting together RFPs for this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Kind of the scale of, I mean, he's paying himself $12 an hour to, it's not a lot. And I don't doubt 300 hours is probably conservative. I don't know. That's a pretty complicated sculpture you got ahead of you, so.
Right. Yeah, and we've talked about that and sort of discussed it as a cost of learning for the emerging artist,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
And most sculptures aren't multifunctional. Like this is going to actually be a bench at a bus stop. So I think, you know, we can think about allocating more resources for something that's playing more than one purpose.
So then, Rachel, I guess my question is, you know, I guess what was helpful when Wendy was doing this was to kind of have that updated budget of like, this is what we've spent for this fiscal year, or how things are allotted.
Yeah.
I never remember that, I'm sorry.
Sure, yeah,
I just know we like do things with money, and we spend the money, and somehow we carry over every year, and then things get spent. So, but I guess I'd want to see how much do we have left? Can we completely cover this cost with this fiscal year? Or what would it look like moving forward for the next sort of budgeting, which is, of course, you know, it would be carrying over into the discussion for FY25.
Yes. Let me see.
Yes.
Okay.
What is that kind of can of worms for you?
Well, it's okay. I mean, with these projects, they typically take longer than one fiscal year, so we've carried over in the past, and it's not that big of a concern. Based on what we plan to spend and what we have spent, kind of the unencumbered funds sitting in the public art budget is still around that 20,000. And what we've spent so far out of this 12,000 that we had allocated to this budget is 2,600.
So if we agreed to this proposal of increasing it to almost 22,000, can we cover it with our current fiscal year, or will we need to borrow $1,000 or so from next year?
Yeah, the 21,000 includes the original 12, correct? That's not in addition, yeah. Yeah, then you'd be good to cover it. Just want to point out, as always, that just reduces your ability to act on other opportunities. So it's just up to you of what you want to prioritize.
But I think the 21,000, though, this final number wouldn't include, does it include the mentors? It doesn't include your fee, right? This is basically going back into 10,000, right?
That's a good point.
I mean, we have two different pieces here. We have the mentors agreement, right, which is what Ray is doing for us. So that's $2,000. That's separate from really what Ethan has presented as far as his budget for the art piece.
Forgot about that.
Yeah, yep, that's a good point. I keep forgetting about that part because I basically
Yeah.
think about just donating it to the project, so.
So it's really increasing it from 10 to 22, not 12 to 22.
Well, it would be
Or
going
12, from 12 to 24.
From 12 to 24, correct, yep.
3,000, almost 3,000 is contingency. So if that money isn't actually needed, is that, even if it is budgeted, is it going to be spent, or is it just going to stay in the pool?
It would stay, I guess, I assume it would stay in the pool, right? I mean,
Yeah, well, I think Anita made a good point that, these budget numbers aren't final yet. That's why I'm kind of pushing you in the direction more of like, let me know what you feel that threshold is, and then we can work these details out. I mean, we'll continue to try to shave costs where we can, and just need to know like what that limit is.
So I would propose that we put a limit of 2,400 total on this as a cost learning.
24,000.
24,000, right, 24,000. With the, next time we'll do it different, but this time we're sort of in the fray of it, and I think everyone's pretty motivated to see it come to fruition, but it can't exceed the 24,000. Because some of this is already incurred, so we're already invested to a degree where it would be difficult to pull out, or to, like we had the exploratory meeting about doing something else, but our collaborators, our community collaborators are invested in this design, and this is the design that they agreed to and that they have envisioned, I think, so. So I guess my proposal, I'll make it really short because this was rambly, is that we put a cap of 24,000 on the project with the hope that that will not all be necessary, but it is not to exceed that amount. Is that?
So that would be a motion. Is there discussion, or?
What is the not to exceed work, or would we just say the budget is 24,000?
I second that.
yeah, I mean, I think it would be not to exceed, right? Yeah, I think that's where we're at.
Okay.
And I'm assuming that does nothing to affect the extra, 5,000 plus that we've kind of moved over to the Lucas Farms project, correct?
Yeah, that won't affect that.
Just, okay.
That came from,
Yeah, I assumed it was not included then in the unencumbered 20,000, but just wanted to double check.
I guess, if there's no other discussion, all in favor of that motion?
Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Make it so.
Beautiful.
Well, thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it very much. Cool.
Okay.
Will there be any updates as far as where, location or?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, do you prefer to continue that subcommittee? Do you just want me to play that role and update as needed? Just let me know what you'd like to do.
Who was on the subcommittee? All you guys?
I think we have it down, but we just want to have it solidified, so I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if the subcommittee needs to continue on. I think that what we'll have to do, though, so what, Ray and Ethan, as we move, so there's 4 sites are identified, right? So is the intent that the South District is determining which one they want to move forward with, or are you planning on moving forward with number 1? Okay, I guess because obviously the two that you identify, the first 2 on the list are next to city properties that are already owned. So I think the first site probably would lend itself to be the best location just from an usability. The second location, there's a city property next to it, but that's also a future fire station site. So
Right.
I'm not certain that location number 2 is going to be a good site. It could be, I guess, but
Right.
I think if everybody's comfortable focusing on number 1, I think we can really push that part forward.
Yeah, and the conversations that I did have with South District, one of the members did mention the fire station potentially going there. I think they had said it was like 10 years or
It's,
more.
it's,
since- yeah.
it's a while out, but
Sure,
yeah.
sure.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I know that at least that member would be happy to know that that's sort of still in the plan and would weigh on their decision-making for the process for sure. Yeah. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
No,
but-
I mean, I think the number one site I mean, that seems to be, that would be my preferred site. I guess that, moving, I know obviously Julie may feel differently from a Parks and Rec standpoint, but I'm certain that she probably would be comfortable with that too.
Sure. Yeah,
But
right.
there again, it being adjacent to a public site, it gives it a little bit more flexibility to,
Right.
you know, if it won't fit between the sidewalk and the back curb, it can potentially be behind the sidewalk and, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that was kind of where Ethan and I sort of saw some opportunity too, so.
And the number one site was the Fair Meadows Park?
Yep.
Is that
Fair Meadows
correct?
Park, yep, yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Main thing is the flat grass and the big lot.
Right, yep.
Yep.
That's something that most other locations don't have.
Sure.
They're either in a yard or it's a really small piece of concrete, so.
Right.
Great.
Perfect.
Be in touch.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, good discussion. Moving on to considering the Lucas Farms Neighborhood Indigenous History Art Project RFQ.
Yeah, so included in your agenda packet was a draft RFP, and then in front of you, which I'll include in the minutes, is kind of like a late handout. What's in red is what was added after you got the agenda packet. So Judy was able to get back to me with some of their priorities, so I included what was relevant. Some of the other things, you know, she had like suggestions of things they could do. I thought that might be better for a public input session with the neighborhood, so that's not included here, but just kind of their priorities and help the artists understand what the vision is here.
So the biggest thing I noticed was just updating the budget for that to the 17,
Yes, yep.
17 whatever it is. My other, I'm not an artist who does public art. I'm not an artist at all that does private art. So I guess the timeline seemed very quick for this. And I guess my concern with it is the idea of being able to advertise thoroughly to both the Meskwaki community and potentially other Indigenous organizations or arts organizations, et cetera, to make sure that we are advertising out and being as thorough as we can, since we have specified preference for an Indigenous artist.
Okay. Push that timeline out a little.
Perhaps. I mean, I don't know. Maybe this is not an issue at all. I was just kind of thinking, you know, would we have time to do a lot of advertising, because it feels like it might require more advertising. But I don't know. What I mean,
It looks like there is a typo on the project schedule. The final design presented, the second one from the bottom, is January 2024. And it happens after
Okay.
other stuff. So it's probably like May or something, I'm guessing. But as far as how long the design and process takes once an artist is selected, that seems okay to you. It's just you're worried about the advertising getting it long enough to prepare a proposal.
that's the only thing I feel like I have any sort of remote ability to
Sure.
you know, comment on. So I don't know, but that was what really concerned me, was just the quick submission deadline.
But
But-
yeah, based on like the submission deadline, which is 5 weeks from now-ish, but it hasn't gone out yet, when would it go out?
Immediately, basically. If you guys approved of it, I'd go ahead and put it out.
Like
But we can,
tomorrow?
yeah.
Wow. And when we put it out, where do we put it?
It would just go out through like our general news channel and public art platform.
I just feel like it's going to need a bit more, perhaps. So I don't know whether that's sending it to, administration office, the Meskwaki settlement. I know there's a museum, cultural museum, perhaps staff there.
Iowa Arts Council.
Yes, yeah, I know, I don't know if,
Okay.
I just
Yeah.
think it requires some different channels as well.
No, agreed. Good feedback.
It's just also really hard because then after the 11th, you kind of hit holiday
Yeah.
craziness, like it's hard to get attention from people. So, and of course, if one thing gets pushed back, everything gets pushed back. It's the other part of this. Because who made the schedule?
Just me. Julie
Oh.
weighed in on it.
Okay.
Mhm, Yeah.
Well, we could,
I based it a little bit off the airport mural timeline, slightly different project, but
and I think if we didn't feel like the response was adequate, we could extend it. Would that be
yeah.
within our providence? Like we could go with this, and if we just sort of felt like, oh, there's two
Yes,
people
I
or
don't know.
whatever, or the committee doesn't feel like, the committee meets and they question the viability of any of the projects, it could be expanded. Would that, what do you think? How did you feel about the airport timeline? Like, how did that go?
I didn't hear any negative.
Yeah, I mean, it felt fine.
Yeah, it seems reasonable to say if we don't hear back from any applicants, we can extend it further at that time.
Yeah, I think the airport was really nice, so,
It turned out great.
I don't know. So maybe we just have to make the effort to, like, if you could send us the thing,
Yep.
then we could send that too, like, try to get that, maybe even try to see if Little Village would publish it.
And
It would be
it's
easy
just
enough to
a
go online.
qualifications, it's not a proposal, so it's not that much of a effort to put together, It's not like they're having to put together a design proposal. So, seems reasonable.
We have a process, we have a list of who we send out the request to. Obviously, we can do those things on our own if we want to, but, there's a process that these go through.
Yeah, it's more than just the news channels, right?
Right, yeah, no, yeah, right, so we have our list of artists, and, it's going to go out just like any of our other calls would go out.
But the ideas of the Meskwaki and
Yeah.
that's outside of what we normally do, and seems smart.
I don't know, who's on the artist database, but we also don't have a large, in Iowa City, there are a couple of artists I can think of. So just making sure that if we're, asking for a preference of Indigenous artists, that we're trying to disseminate a little bit.
Coincidentally, like a week ago, our Equity and Human Rights Director received an inquiry from a member of the Meskwaki Nation who's interested in doing a mural. And I
Fabulous.
shared that maybe a mural is not necessarily what they were looking, but
Sure.
this was opportunities coming up. So she was going to share that back too as soon as we were ready.
Awesome.
So I think we do have some good connections, and it was a nice reminder. I can kind of bolster our efforts on that front.
I think.
I have a question about the, sorry, were you going to say something?
No, go ahead.
I have a question about the call for, or the document. So it says that they were looking for a wayfinding or a sculpture. So were they leaning more towards something like a wayfinding piece, or were they not decided on that?
Yeah, that was the element I had a hard time conveying in there, so open to feedback. But what the neighborhood would like is to kind of leave what the art platform looks like up to the artists, provide some flexibility there, but still maintain some element of wayfinding. So keeping in mind their kind of long-term vision for wayfinding signage throughout the neighborhood, and this idea that the piece that ends up in Highland Park could be kind of the first stop on like a tour of the neighborhood or something like that. So somehow incorporating in, you know, wayfinding and historical kind of history, I guess.
I guess the part in red kind of makes it feel like they're just looking for wayfinding. Like, is there a way we can add in there that if they choose to do a public art piece, that wayfinding would also be included?
Sure.
But it's not like,
Yeah, it almost seems like to start with that is difficult, like, because it would seem like, well, then you want a map.
It's a sculptural wayfinding device, but, yeah.
I mean, yeah, it does sound like kind of a map is. I don't know how else you do a singular wayfinding.
Put it on sculpture. I don't know.
But, I mean, that second bullet point, I think, describes it pretty well, that it's the starting point, a singular element that could be built upon. So, yeah, any other comments or discussion on this? I think with
well, they said it was wayfinding or a sculpture. So it doesn't have to be wayfinding, or is that something that has to be included? Because it sounded like they were saying either or.
Where did you see that, Jeremy?
In the beginning, it says, let's see, interpret a panel or a public artwork in another form which conveys the project goals. So the main goal is wayfinding? Or are they just open to any type of sculpture?
Yeah, because it is, because it does say like refining a final design and fabricating and installing artistic, attractive, and clear public art signage. That doesn't, like, that is kind of countering, because the artists would have to know what needed to be included in wayfinding and signage before they could ever consider a design, it would seem like.
Okay.
So any artist who's not intimately familiar with the neighborhood and not involved in whatever planning for this wayfinding would have no hope of designing something that was in keeping with that desire.
Is what they want, from your understanding, kind of like the Longfellow historical markers and stuff, or that
Yeah.
that would reference?
I mean, I think that's their
Indigenous.
long-term vision, and I think this project, is now different from that. So maybe that wayfinding piece isn't the top priority now that it has changed and focused on just that Highland Park location. And I can clarify all that with Judy, so really helpful feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess with some clarification on whether this is signage or sculpture, and then the typo on the date on the project schedule, I think everyone, are we good to put this out?
Yeah, and the updated budget.
Okay.
Which is that?
It's currently 12,000, which is the usual public art neighborhood, but then we allocated that extra 5,000 something from the Blackhawk Mini Park project and voted to move that into this project as
So
well.
it's 17.
Yeah.
Which I think we're going to have to be looking at, like, budgets. And, because of just overwhelming cost increases that we've seen. And I don't know, the budget seems like it's been kind of in place for a long time.
Yeah. No, I think we're definitely, we've been doing this multiple times, multiple years. I think it's really time for us to rethink that kind of budgeting.
Or reallocate, or,
Yeah, and-
maybe, do less with, give more and do less, or ask for
Budgets.
more,
Yeah.
or, just some sort of a change, because the affordability for people to do projects of substance is difficult.
Yeah.
Just, I mean, when the second they say signage, I'm saying $5,000, like right there.
Yeah.
Did we ever get a percent for art ordinance, or how does that work with the budget, the general budget?
There's no longer a percent for art in Iowa.
Yeah, we don't
mean,
have an
for
ordinance right now that,
I think it was perhaps the riverfront crossings development,
yeah.
and that is no access to that, or,
Yeah, there's some funding in the Riverfront Crossings Fund for art that has to remain in that
Sure, sure.
district.
Okay.
Yeah. That was a fee in lieu payment from a developer.
and that was like a one-time thing? thus
Yeah, in
far?
exchange for other incentives that they got for the development project, so.
Yep, okay.
So we need a motion then for approving this contingent on some tweaks to the wordage, the verbiage? Okay, I can motion that.
And budget.
Oh, and budget, yes, the additional money in the budget that was set aside from the Black Hawk Park project.
I could second it.
You should so second. You should so do it.
I should so second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll just say on that, since it will involve going back to Judy to clarify into the neighborhood, I might have to push that timeline out based on her response. So I'll keep the kind of the general, what you've approved tonight, but might see a shift depending on when I'm able to get it out.
Yeah, I think having it, the responses due like in early January is kind of a nice,
Okay.
give people the break if they have some time off for the holidays or something to put time towards that.
And that would kind of change all the other dates by a
Yeah,
month?
yeah.
Or just-
It would push it all out.
Shift back, yep.
And it's a nice budget. I feel good about that budget. I think it's realistic to get something good.
I do think at some point in the new year, we should think about this as either a whole committee or a subcommittee to really rethink budget on some of these longstanding projects and our programs. It just feels time.
When is the next time we set? Do you know that? Is that our-
Yep, city staff are preparing their request for the fiscal year '25 budget, which starts July 1 of 2024. So probably the city council approves the final budget in March. So then at that time, we could have that discussion about, how we want to allocate our funds for the next fiscal year.
So
Would
if-
we do that before March to try to, if we find like we need $5,000 more in this budget, or?
Well, that would have to occur at the time of request, so currently, right now. And so then you'd be asking the city council to increase your overall budget. It's an option, I guess. It's a very challenging time in the city, and we can get into that in another discussion if you'd like, but.
Okay, I just was curious
Yeah.
about timeline and.
I did submit a request for an additional $5,000 to help bolster our maintenance program, so we'll see how
Great,
that
thank
shakes
you.
out.
Okay, that's great.
Which brings us right to the next project.
Yeah, the wooden sculptures.
Yeah, so as we've talked about all the new projects we're bringing online today, it's a good reminder that, we need to set some time aside to really talk maintenance. So we had, at your September meeting, you had approved a contract with Dave Dennis to restore 3 public art pieces. As part of that, one was the wooden Kovalev sculptures, which are in Willow Creek Park. Dave had kind of simultaneously been contracted with the city of Coralville to work on the bear that was outside of their library, which was done by the same artist and also wooden. He found in that bear a large amount of dry rot, and all of the methods that he's tried have proved just infeasible. They aren't going to work. And so he's having a really hard time with that and didn't feel comfortable proceeding with our agreement because our sculptures are even worse condition. So we went ahead and just pulled that out of the agreement so he could proceed with the other two while he continued to research. And he spent, the whole month of October just he did a really great job of just, looking in every nook and cranny for a solution, a restoration method that might work. He even, looked so far as, can we recreate this in a different form? And it was just too high a cost to consider that. So he decided that, the best advice he could give us is that it's, probably beyond restoration at this point. And so this committee might just have to consider retiring the art piece. Julie when I talked to Julie about it, she thought, because of what they're made of and because of kind of the unique little role they play in the park already, we might get another 10 years out of them as they just kind of continue to decay, and they would just kind of go through that natural process if you did choose to retire the art pieces. They were donated by a couple of different community members. One has since passed. Another Julie was able to connect with, and he understood. And the third no longer lives in Iowa City, and I tried to connect with him, but haven't heard back, so I don't know.
And so can you tell me a little bit about the origins or the Kovalev, where that name comes from?
Yeah, so he was a Russian sculptor. Valery Kovalev was his name, and he would often visit Iowa City because he just had connections here, and I think had connections with the University of Iowa as well. So Art Small, who was a former politician in Iowa, had contracted Kovalev to build a sculpture of his family or carve a sculpture of his family. So that's one of the ones you see in Willow Creek Park. There's a man surrounded by others, and that's Art Small and his family. And then Howard Horan, whose I think parents lived nearby, thought, hey, that was really great. And his dad was a lover of Russian literature, so he also contracted the same artist to make a couple of more. And that's how I know of a few of them. I'm not sure about the third individual who donated.
It's interesting that they can just kind of remain in place and weather.
Yeah.
My concern with that is, if the general public who sees them wouldn't be aware that that's the plan and would see them decaying in public and perhaps be thinking that the city is neglecting them.
But, this is where I think some interpretive signage to explain that, the city has done due diligence to try to restore them. There is no feasible alternative at the moment. But I think it could be not a teachable moment, but I do think something interpretive would have to be put there. I absolutely think that's right. You can't just have these
Abandoned,
sculptures,
yeah.
dying and rotting, and continuing to deteriorate, and without some sort of, I think, acknowledgement of the process that we have gone through thus far.
And that it's being done intentionally and not.
Yes, and that
yeah.
this is what we're, and
Absolutely.
And I do think it is also a lesson for the city and public art that, if wood gets put in.
Gotta be more proactive.
We've got to be proactive, yeah. Yeah.
I guess, as far as your suggestion of the signage, that I don't know how soon, if Julie starts hearing complaints or something.
Well, we haven't gotten any complaints. You can't really, looking at them now, they seem okay. It's just when you break them open and look inside. But I think before we got to the point of, I think they would be removed at some point, if, probably before we would install signage. But
Well, then my.
That would be of equal cost, probably. There's cost to removing something, just as there's cost of putting up a sign.
yeah, I don't know what it looks like as they decay and if it's a safety issue or,
Right.
yeah.
Well, I was also wondering about talking to Howard Horan, would he want, I know they've been donated to the city, but if they are, would there be any consideration of, removing to then give back? I don't know how that plays. I've never been an art donor, so I don't know if that feels insulting, but also just if, before they were to completely go, would we want them out there to just decay, or would, Howard Horan perhaps want them moved back? I don't know where they would go indoors. I don't know, just if that sort of conversation has been had with donors, I guess.
There's a couple different Kovalevs. I don't know which one this is. I'm not familiar, but would it be wise to give the art to one of the museums, the Stanley or the Cedar Rapids, to be put inside? Would that?
Yeah, my understanding, so, there's dry rot in there and there's like bugs as well. And so my understanding from Dave is, moving them inside is not really an option either. And I think just trying to fill the cavities where the rot is and clean that rot out is, I think he thinks that's going to destroy the piece, so.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Cardinal rule for preserving peace. Don't ruin the peace. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, I think that a lot has been explored, and the reasoning seems sound if they can't be restored, but to keep an eye on them and remove them once the damage becomes really evident, so it doesn't just become sad.
Sounds good. I think.
If we have,
Go ahead.
go ahead. If we have to remove them, maybe this is a little bit silly, but can we replace them with baby bears? Can we have some other bears commissioned to replace?
Little baby bear.
Just an idea. Just an idea.
Sorry, Jimmy, I really love it. I'm like, ooh, baby bear sculptures, so.
We'll revisit that.
I mean, if it's, you said maybe there's even 10 years left in these, possibly, depending on just the rate at which they continue
Depends on the weather
to
and
decay,
yeah,
sure.
all kinds of things.
So, yeah, we'll see.
But it is, this is part of the maintenance program, and so this should be listed as a piece to be watched and not maintained. That we've already sort of gone down that route, so
Yeah.
somebody doesn't have to revisit that.
Yeah.
Develop a maintenance for all these pieces.
We need a motion.
A motion.
To approve this decommissioning.
I motion that we not pursue the maintenance on this project and allow nature to run its course.
Second.
Oh, Jeremy seconded.
Seconded,
All right.
yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I,
Great. Great. Next one is planning for the 2024 Public Art Matching Grants.
So this is going to come up quickly. I believe last year, the grants went out in March. I've heard from a couple of members that there maybe is some interest in just reviewing the process, so just wanted a little direction, kind of knowing our timeline going forward. If you would like to have a subcommittee work on that, if you want me to kind of prepare something, just, again, need direction on like the amount, timing, any desired changes to the process.
I think I would like to look at the wording on the grant and things, because, we ran into where people would just put budget as budget, but if we could be sent that so that we could alter some of and clarify some of the wording, especially about what designates public space versus private space, because those were just some of the problems we ran into with the last round, if I'm recalling correctly.
We had some money grabs that felt.
Right, that it can't be promoting of a secondary business. Obviously, if an artist is doing a work, they're promoting their they're making art and they're promoting themselves as an artist, you know. But it can't be like, and I run a boutique shop, or I run a flower shop or something like that. It can't be, they can't be
Advertisement.
promoting a secondary interest, or, yes, I don't know how you would word that, but
But it does feel, yeah,
it can't be advertisement for another venture beyond that
Because
activity.
when is it scheduled to go out in the spring? You said?
Well, I mean, it's really up to you all, but last year, I think the year before that, it went out a little bit earlier in the spring, and last year it went out in March, if that sounds right. And, I just wanted to kind of put it on the radar with this agenda item, so if you prefer that, we get it on the next agenda, you have a time to look through the prior application and then have a real discussion, we can do that.
Sounds great.
yeah, I think I'd like to do that.
Okay?
Yeah, I would like to just look at it and change some of the wording and, just because budget, people just put materials as the budget. And so I think we want to ask for a little more detail in the materials. And also about if this is an object to be placed, that some investigation has to be
Yes.
done. You can't just put it, you would need to contact. And how do we refer them to the person to be contacted without without burdening staff?
I feel like that's in there.
It's already in there.
Yeah.
I'm pretty certain the staff members are identified who they need to contact.
But I'd also like to be really stern, like, if you don't, if Julie doesn't know about this before she reads that grant, you're out.
I
You're
think that
done.
is, I
You know,
think that is part of it. Yeah, there's a due process, and you do have to, you can't just propose to put something in City Park and never talk to anybody who would, and there has to be some safety built in. It's a public work, it can't harm people, and things of that nature, and maintenance, like, what is the duration of this object? You can't just put something in the park and then walk away necessarily. You have to have some kind of an idea of what is the longevity, is this, and then what is the removal mechanism if it's not meant to be?
Maintenance plan if it is meant to be there long term.
Right, because we had proposals for planters, but no budget for plants, and no proposal of like, how are those plants maintained? Who's taking care of this?
Yeah.
Because that's a thing. Well, and there's ways of, like there's the Master Gardener Association, that's a phone call, you can call them and see, they do volunteers for the Kiwanis, it's in Willow Creek, the park with the.
Is it the Kiwanis?
The Kiwanis Park, yeah,
Yeah.
they're adjacent to each other, yeah.
Okay, but there's also the the other garden too, the little garden that is for hospice care.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And that's maintained by the Master Gardeners of Johnson County. They have like a Tuesday morning periodic cleanups that they do. So like things like that, like somebody would have to have that, and there are resources where, like groups that will do that work, but it can't just be tagged into Parks and Rec because they're busy.
And nobody wants dead crispy plants in the planters.
The hospice place.
So we'll just include that in next month's packet for our review. And, all right. Sounds great. There was, in the agenda, there was the Herkion Parade. Is that just part of staff updates?
Yeah, I
Okay.
will mention that in staff updates.
We're to
Okay,
staff
on to
updates?
staff updates. So as Steve mentioned, I included the call for creativity that the Herkion Parade Committee has issued. So just wanted to bring it to your attention and hope that you can use your networks to push it out and encourage artists to apply. Other than that, I wanted to give an update on the public art coordinator position, which is that Wendy's former position of economic development and public art coordinator has been filled, and I am the new public art and economic development coordinator. So I'm very excited to keep working with all of you, and hope you are too.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you. And then just wanted to know, we do have a couple of vacancies coming up on the Public Art Advisory Committee. Eddie decided to resign from the committee, so applications are currently being accepted for his position, and appointment will be made at the next council meeting, or maybe the one after. And then both Steve and Jenny's terms end at the end of December.
And then I know that Steve's is the design professional versus an at-large, and then so Eddie's will already sort of be filled perhaps at the next meeting? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think of like people I could ask, so.
Yeah.
And then at-large.
That's all for staff updates.
Do we have an outline of the new Herky pose?
Oh, is it going to be a
It's,
different one?
it's
Oh,
that, it's in the picture there, right?
Okay, yeah, I didn't know if it was a secret or
Oh,
not,
it's-
so.
Hey. Flexing those muscles
Yeah.
a little more than usual.
This is the city, not the university. This is the city that does the Herkies, not your
The
Iowa.
Convention and Visitors Bureau runs it, yeah.
Okay.
Any other staff updates? No? Anything else from you guys? Great.
Motion to adjourn?
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, see you, Jeremy. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jeremy.